Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you all this evening for Conversations with Global Leaders, which is moderated by Professor Alon Ben-Meir. I'm Robert Lappiner. I'm Dean of the School of Continuing and Professional Studies, in which the Center for Global Affairs sits, and we are enormously proud of the center and of programs such as this. How many of you are regular attendees at our functions? So I suspect an introduction is not required. But the center occupies a very special place within NYU, within our school, within the city, because of its dual function, like all of our school, in educating professionals for fields of study which are closely allied to areas of remarkable expertise in New York and the world, but also as a place for assuring public conversations so that we provide a vehicle for enlightened citizenship. And no program occupies that space more fully and with more energy and vision than the center. And of course, it's led by our admirable divisional dean, Vera Jelinek. Because you're familiar friends, I will not have an elaborate conversation. It is true that we looked at staging some activity outside to create the flavor of the contemporary Middle East. But apart from that bit of playful exaggeration, I really will be brief. Professor Alon Ben-Meir has been a central part of the center's profile in the city and the world, not only as a faculty member in our graduate program where he teaches negotiation, but obviously for his programs of outreach and none more than these remarkable events of Conversations with Global Leaders. We are particularly pleased this evening to have one such leader with us who is a representative of a country that has been vital in world affairs for at least 5 millennia, and obviously has been the focal point of the world's attention in recent weeks. And this is, of course, Ambassador Abdulaziz. I would like to turn the program over to our illustrious moderator, expert on Middle Eastern affairs, superb journalist and scholar whose blogs on the Middle East are really essential reading for the enlightenment that they provide. Professor Ben-Meir will then introduce formally our ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean Lappiner. I'm most grateful for your lavish introduction. We have, this is probably the fourth year, and we have had over the last semesters at least 25 guests coming to this kind of setting. And I must tell you with all honesty that tonight, for me, it's rather unique, very unique. And it is unique because not only because of what's going on in the Middle East, which is, which is part of what we're literally witnessing history in the making. But the gentleman that's sitting right to my right, he is himself a unique individual. Unique in so many different ways. Just think of this. There is a change of government in Egypt, a transformational, historic transformation that's taking place in Egypt. But he's still the ambassador of Egypt at the United Nations. What does that tell you? To me, it tells a great deal. As a person who has devoted entire his adult life to the welfare and well-being of Egypt. He's been an advisor to President Mubarak from 1999 to 2005, direct advisor on international affairs. But he's also served in so many different capacities in the United Nations. Honestly, I don't know, and I know many wonderful ambassadors throughout the United Nations, but I don't know anyone that has had the experience that Ambassador Aziz has had and still have at the United Nations. So, I can go on and tell you so much about it, but one thing I do want to impart with you, and that is about a couple of months, was it, or less than that, I went to see him again, and I sat down. We usually have the wonderful conversation. And I said to him, right on the spot, Ambassador Abdulaziz, would you come on April 4th to such and such program? And of all people, mostly will tell you, let me think about it, I'll consider it. On the spot, he said, He called his secretary, am I free on the 4th? She said, yes, Mr. Ambassador, you are free. I will be there. So what can I tell you? It is an honor, it is a pleasure, it is a treat to have someone of the caliber of Ambassador Abdulaziz to be with us tonight. And it is, for me, it is nothing less than the greatest honor. And I thank you so much, Ambassador, for being here. So, Ambassador Abdulaziz, it's all yours. Please.
Thank you very much. Dr. Robert Lappner, Dean of the New York University School of Continuing and Professional Studies. Dr. Vera Jelinek, Provisional Dean of the Center for Global Affairs. Dr. Alon Ben-Meir, Professor of International Relations of the Center for Global Affairs. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here today in this historic Woolworth building, among devoted scholars, promising students, and members of the public with keen interest in the critical issues of our time. It is an honor to be representing today a country that has once again changed the course of history, and a unique privilege to belong to a people that have yet again inspired millions worldwide. History books around the world details the splendors of ancient Egypt. They recount the invaluable contributions of our ancestors to mankind and recall powerful pharaohs and enigmatic queens, Akhenaton and Khufu, Nefertiti and Cleopatra, just to name a few. Now, and after the January 25th revolution, the names of millions of ordinary Egyptians will also be eternally engraved in the collective memory of the world, because together they have accomplished the exceptional. History will remember them for their determination, their courage, their dignity, and above all, their humanity, for they have struck a chord in the heart and soul of every one of us. It was personally difficult for me to follow the events back home from far away, but the voices chanting in Tahrir Square could be heard from here. Their legitimate calls for democracy and justice transcended time and space. The root causes of their anger are too familiar: political frustrations coupled with rising unemployment, lack of economic opportunities, and widespread social inequalities, countless promises of a better tomorrow from a secluded political leadership. But tomorrow never came. Last year's parliamentary elections were, by many accounts, the straw that broke the camel's back, marred with allegations of fraud and voters' manipulations. Boycotted by the main opposition forces, its result clearly reflected the democratic mirage Egypt was living, a mirage the revolution is bravely determined to turn into reality. This revolution was by all means truly Egyptian. It was a people's revolution led by young Egyptians and joined by millions from all walks of life. Our youth proved many of us wrong, often blamed for being passive and indifferent to their country's fate. They have shown that they possess the heightened sense of awareness and civic pride, and confirmed that they are the real agent of change. It was a modern revolution. At its core lie dormant aspirations as old as history that were given a life by the social networking tools of today: Facebook, Twitters, YouTube, and the rest, connecting and mobilizing people at the speed light. Some of you might have heard the name of Khalid Said, a young Egyptian who died in June 2010 under disputed circumstances after being arrested by the police. Khalid is one of the silent heroes of the revolution. The disturbing post-mortem picture of his distorted face became the explosive symbol of police cruelty. Once posted on the internet, it went in no time viral, outraging millions of Egyptians and sparkling the mass protests that led to the revolution. It was by all means a secular revolution, far from the Islamic uprising some were wrongly predicting. Egyptians are deeply religious citizens, but in the midst of the million-man protesters that sprawled Egypt, religion was simply a silent bystander, because the claims of peoples were universal, with no allegiance of any religion. The revolution was also remote from the recent isolated incidents between Muslims and Copts that some like to depict as signs of sectarian divide. The emotional display of interfaith harmony during the revolution moved many of us. It proved that religious pluralism is a positive force and reaffirmed that Muslims and Copts in Egypt remain united as they have been during the past centuries. It was first and foremost a peaceful revolution, entrenched in our cultural heritage, protected by our armed forces, who embraced their people in a touching show of solidarity. Martin Luther King once proclaimed that, and I quote, "Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon. It is a sword that heals," unquote. Egyptians proved him right. Regrettably, a number of them lost their lives to achieve their dream of a new Egypt, including my sister's son-in-law. We salute and honor those martyrs. But now the difficult work begins. Translating the demands of the revolution is a colossal responsibility. It requires reordering priorities and channeling human and capital resources differently. It entails rebuilding political institutions and parties of new democratic and pluralistic foundations. It also involves altering some economic choices to meet the needs of the current phase, a particularly challenging task given the losses our economy incurred during the past few weeks. But we trust that with the help of our international partners, we will overcome these hurdles. The Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, who is leading the current transitional phase until parliamentary and presidential elections are held, has made it clear that the political priorities now revolve around ensuring the transition to a civil authority, enforcing the constitutional amendments recently endorsed by 77.2% of the voters who participated in the 19th of March referendum until a new constitution is drawn up, lifting the state of emergency, fighting corruption in all its forms, upholding accountability, and promoting human rights and the fair enforcement of the rule of law to enable the growth of a well-functioning and flourishing society. Restoring stability and security ranks also high among the current priorities, as well as rebuilding trust between the people and the police forces. Quite a tricky mission given the abusive practices by some of them in the past. This is being done by reconstructing the police forces in a manner that would ensure that they serve the society at large. That is why Egyptians applauded the recent decision to disband the notorious state security services, a first and long-awaited step towards reforming the entire security apparatus, so that instead of spreading a culture of repression and fear, it plays the role it was originally created for, by protecting the people and safeguarding their fundamental rights and freedoms. Economically, priority will be given to combating poverty, creating jobs, and ensuring social welfare and equity. We need to start from, no need to start from scratch. We can build on some of the successful reforms launched in the past few years, but we have to ensure that their benefits are not amazed by the business elite and actually trickle down to the ordinary people, not just in Cairo, but also in other 28 governorates, especially in Upper Egypt, in places like Asyut, Sohag, and Kena, long deprived of economic prosperity. To achieve the high growth rates we aspire to, we are working on restoring confidence in our economy, so that local and foreign investments flow back into our productive sectors and tourism booms once again. I was in Cairo a couple of weeks ago on the occasion of the visit of the United Nations Secretary General to Egypt, who was keen to witness the momentous changes on the ground and offer us the helping hand of the organization he is heading. Yet another show of solidarity from a reliable and long-standing partner. We have been overwhelmed by the support expressed by the international community. Its leaders have assured us of their willingness to help Egypt as it leaps towards democratic change. And we trust that they are partners we can count on. Our message to them has been unequivocal. Egypt is not a failed state. We have solid institutions and firm state structures, and what is needed is reviving them to the benefit of each and every Egyptian. I spent just 3 days in Cairo, but was struck by how different the new spirit of Egypt is. It is quite refreshing and uplifting. I could feel the winds of hope and change strongly blowing in all directions from Tahrir Square, opening many doors that were once thought to be locked forever. Not only in Egypt, but throughout the Arab world, in North Africa and the Gulf, in Yemen and Syria, Bahrain and, of course, Libya. Events are unfolding at an unstoppable pace, and unfortunately, in some cases, at a very high human cost, and with very serious regional and international implications. Egypt's role in the region and the wider world can only but grow stronger. We will continue to hold the position of responsible leadership in the region with no ounce of hesitation. We remain committed to the principles that have for long guided our foreign policy. We will continue to honor all our obligations and will remain faithful to all international agreements, including those signed with our neighbors. We will tirelessly pursue peace in the Middle East, no matter how elusive this goal often seems. The future of Egypt has been reclaimed by its own empowered people. It is still a work in progress. It remains uncertain, but it will, for sure, be bright and prosperous. The road is long and thorny, but there are no easy shortcuts to democracy and social justice. I am personally optimistic, hopeful. It is time to infinite possibilities and great opportunities in Egypt, and this time Egyptians are determined to seize every one of them. Thank you, and I look forward to discussing with you in more details everything that's on the table.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You know, I just want to mention those of you who haven't switched their phone, please do so now. And I also want to acknowledge, you know, it takes a great deal of work to put a program like this together. I want to acknowledge Alice is here, and Skylar, and certainly Mohammed from the His Excellency's office. Thank you all for your wonderful work and to make this event possible. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador, again.
Thank you.
You know, let me begin with the general question, and that is, it's been referred to what's going on now in the Middle East, in the Arab world, as the Arab Spring. Where do you think this is going to lead?
This is going to lead to more democratic changes. At the beginning, there is going to be a lot of changes that people do not know where they're going. But after it settles down and after it is everything is running in place, things are going to look much better than it was in the Arab world.
Do you feel that it is fair to assume that the impact of this uprising throughout the Arab world is certainly not going to have the same impact in every single different country? That is, each country will be impacted somewhat differently. Where do you see that? Do you see, for example, what happened in Egypt is not being duplicated exactly, say, in Libya. There are certain differences. How do you see these changing, affecting various different countries, specifically the ones that are still going on, that have major turmoil?
No, the impact is going to change on how the way forward is going to be charted. In Egypt, the president decided to step down and to let the Supreme Military Council run the country in a very peaceful way, and so that no more lives were lost, except about 300 who were lost in the demonstrations in the first few days. But in Libya, it's totally different. The leaders there are still clinging to power, and they're still fighting it through, and that would end up with very serious implications. It might divide the country into two countries, one in the east and one in the west. It might end up with a massive flow of refugees that are going to flow to Egypt and Tunisia. It will end up with many violations of human rights. That's why the ICC has been involved in resolutions of the Security Council. So each country has its own characteristic and its own human rights, its own rights and obligations, its own economic strength, its own role in the region or in the Arab world.
Now let me just speak on, continue with Libya, because obviously what Gaddafi has been doing and continue to do is outrageous, to say the least. The Arab League have passed a resolution, the no-fly zone. Egypt supported the resolution. And still to this very moment, only Qatar effectively is participating in trying to support the rebels in Libya. I was wondering, why is it that Egypt has not taken an active part, an active role in support of the rebels in Libya, which is next door to you?
Because, I mean, to support the rebels in Libya, that would entail aggravating. We were in a position of lose-lose situation. If you support the rebels and then Gaddafi will prevail at the very end, then you have bad relations with Gaddafi.
But you really think it is an option for Gaddafi to prevail?
Up to now, it is an option, because the Security Council resolution prohibited 1970, prohibited, put an arms embargo, and prohibited supplying anybody on the Libyan territory with arms or with any kind of assistance. So you can't assist either parties, otherwise you will be in violation of human rights resolution.
But then having said that, you know, the nearly 50 countries, 48 of them gathered in London, and they all agree, and some Arab states participated in these deliberations, that Gaddafi's survival is not an option. And the United States President Obama has also pretty much stated that this is no longer possible to have a Libya led by Gaddafi. So the argument to suggest that he might stay in power and therefore Egypt will not be interfering probably doesn't really stand on a strong ground.
No, that's not the only. That's not the only factor. I was drawing other set of factors. The factor is not only that Gaddafi is going to prevail. The main factor that we had about 1.3 million Egyptians living in Libya, and about 300,000 of them went back home. We still have 1 million Egyptians in Libya. More than half of them, about 700,000, under the control of in the territories where Gaddafi is there. And having the experience of what happened in Iraq, of using foreigners as human shields, and in these kind of military operations, made us a little bit more worried that our citizens are going to be at risk. And that is why we did not participate in the meetings that were held in Paris and in London, and we did not participate in enforcing the no-fly zone,
yes.
Even though it was agreed by the Arab League. But the question here is whether we supported the no-fly zone to protect humanitarian interests, not to regime change. And that is what the basic difference is. The United Nations going to go, or that coalition of the willing, is it going to Libya to regime change, or is it going to Libya to protect human rights and to ensure that justice and democracy is going to prevail? But that is the deciding factor.
This is true, but what we are looking at today in Libya, and what we see what Gaddafi's forces are doing, and they're basically merciless. I mean, they are attacking, they're killing indiscriminately. Do you really feel that Egypt can feel comfortable with the continuing literally slaughter that's taking place in Libya, and still not take an active role in trying to determine or at least influence events in Libya? After all, Libya, it's your neighbor. And I just don't see how that could be reconciled with specifically with the Egyptian stand for today.
No, I mean, we will assess this, keep assessing the situation as we go forward. But for the time being, we are refraining from interfering in this coalition of the willing. We were the first to interfere in the coalition of the willing to kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. But this time, the circumstances are different. And the concerns of having another spot for tension on your west borders to be added to the tensions on the south borders. We have Sudan now divided into two countries, and in July there is going to be another Sudan. And if you have Libya also divided in two countries on the west, then we still have our own Middle Eastern questions to handle with. So we are in a much more difficult situation. So what we are working at is to avoid these options. But our positions from interfering militarily or joining the coalition of the willing is going to be evaluated periodically as long as we are going along the road.
Yeah, there are now talk that one of his sons, Saifuddin, presumably has been talking to his own father, trying to make an arrangement whereby he would take over and then his father will retire. Would Egypt support this type of transfer of power from the father to the son?
Well, I mean, wishes to have sons to replace fathers were not only in Libya. They were in many other places in the Arab world. They were in Egypt, they were in Yemen, they were in Syria, but they went through, and they are in many other places.
Well,
no, I don't
exactly
think that we will support that.
You won't support that.
I don't think that we will support that.
You know, let me go back to something I have been arguing about Egypt now. Certainly, you know, when we looked at the demonstrations, there were some very interesting phenomena. One of them we mentioned. People were not talking about Islam they were not condemning Israel as a normal demonstration usually would take place in some of the Arab countries. Israel hardly was mentioned in the Tahrir Square. There was no down with America. The people were looking for reforms, for economic opportunity, for job, etc. My argument has been that to conduct even fair and free election as a schedule this September, in my view, it's going to be too early, because the problem in Egypt is not just a matter of political reform, but it's a question of economic development. When you have nearly 45 to 50 million people on the verge of below the poverty level, for them, political reform really don't mean much. They want food. They want food and freedom. They don't want freedom without food. How are you going to deal with this? Do you still feel that election to be held in September is going to be really the thing that the Egyptians really want, when in fact the only organized political party today will be the Muslim Brotherhood? And if you were to have such an election, the likelihood is the Muslim Brotherhood will have made significant gains, whereas the other secular parties, they will not have enough time to prepare for the election, and we don't even know what their agenda is going to be. How are you going to address this?
Well, that has been subject to the referendum that was done on the 19th of last month, of the 19th of March. And this referendum was on the set of constitutional amendments. And has the people refused the constitutional amendments, then the whole election would have been postponed. At that time, while the debate was going on those articles, there has been two schools of thoughts. One school of thought that says that let us reject those articles, let us form a council to run the country of 4 civilians and 1 military, and then we draft a new constitution altogether first, and then based on the new constitution we have elections of the parliament and then elections of the president. That's going to take about 2 years. The second was, let us do these intermediate changes in the constitution, and then after those intermediate changes in the constitution are done, we have the elections of the parliament, and then we elect the president, and then a new constitution is going to be drafted within 1 year, and then we'll take it from there for the next phase. People were talking about Egypt, whether it should continue as a presidential country or it should continue as a parliamentary country, meaning that the prime minister would be governing and the president would have less power. And others were saying, no, the president should be there, but with less power. So there has been a lot of discussion about this issue, but the people have voted 77.2%, as I said, to the amendments and to go into the shorter period of time, because they don't also want the military to be there forever. And that is something that has been. I understand the concern about the issue of the Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafi groups that are prevailing and that are having more activities nowadays. But the reality of the matter is that people realize what is good for them. And the elections which we had in the universities for the school, for the students' boards, where there were massive numbers of the Muslim Brotherhood, but they only got 23% of the vote. So that makes us, I mean, that's kind of a sampler of what exactly is the strength, the point of strength of the Muslim Brotherhood in the society. I'm personally not, I don't feel that they have much strength than 23-25% of the society. I don't worry much about that.
But that still represents, a quarter of the 25%. That's quite
yeah, but some worry about something else you didn't mention, which is the return of the National Democratic Party. It's kind of like the counter-revolution. That the National Democratic Party, the party that has his chair was the president, former president, still have its own organization, still have its own apparatus, and still strong in could be mobilizing some more votes. So these are the two concerns that are being.
But do you think the public actually is going to trust the former Democratic Party?
No, there are.
I mean, they have been complaining severely about it.
I'm not speaking about the party per se, because the party itself is non-existent anymore. But what is happening is people that were belonging to that party and that have been tested in the street and that have some constituencies that could be voting for them. But that's another concern beside the concern of the Muslim Brotherhood. But I think also people have much more knowledge, and they are. I mean, if you saw on the referendum day, if you saw, I was there. That's the day I arrived to Cairo, and I went to the referendum. Huge amounts of people going out. I mean, the percentage of participation exceeded about 65-70%, and that is a large amount of people, and from all ages, from all walks of life. And so this is the first time people are getting to express their point of view and to say yes or no to changes.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, having said that, you mentioned a little earlier the role of the military, and I think the military behaved in a very admirable way throughout this revolution. But the truth of the matter is the military was always present, and we're going back to 1952. Abdel Nasser came from the military background, and Sadat followed him also from, and so did Mubarak. So the military presence was always there, and when you say now we don't want to have a military government forever, do you really feel that at any point in time the military is going to relinquish its influence about what's going on in civilian life? For example, if let's say for a moment that the Muslim Brotherhood do come to power, do you think the military will tolerate such a government, the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood, or the rise of any kind of group that the military does not feel? Or do you feel the military is going to maintain sort of along the lines of what Turkey has happened after the revolution, after the establishment of the Turkish Republic, where Ataturk actually, and the military in Turkey until recently was the custodian, making sure that Turkey remained a secular state? Do you feel that the military in Egypt is going to sooner or eventually assume that kind of role?
Yeah, I mean, when I've said that the military should go, that didn't mean that the military is going to disappear. The military is the custodian and the protector of this society. And that is when the president decided to go, he entrusted the military council to run the affairs of the country. And the military is not going to disappear. I mean, if
no, what I'm saying is,
I know what you mean. And I say that even with the presence of a civilian president at the next stage, the military role is going to be there. Maybe not exactly in the same pattern as Turkey has, where the military has the right of veto here and there, but there is going to be a strong role for the military.
But do you feel that the military will assume the role of the custodian of the new emerging democratic Egypt. That is going to ensure that the secular nature of the state will remain. Do you feel that the military is aiming in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think that the military is aiming at changing any structure or doing something that does not really represent what the people want. Whomever the people are going to elect, the military will have to deal with. Whether it is from the Muslim Brotherhood, which I highly disagree with this, it's not going to happen, or whether it is from any other party that is going to be established. We have now a new law allowing any 2,000 persons to form a party as long as they belong to about 15 of our governors. So we have about 40, 50 parties just submitted in the last few weeks. And we might run into a possibility of having about 25 president of candidates for the next presidential candidate. So it is inspiring.
It is also evolving. I just want to go back to the issue, which I think it's been discussed, and I read, many Egyptian scholars have been already talking about it, and that is, without substantial, I want to go back to this central issue now, without substantial economic development program, probably based on sustainable development, it's going to be almost impossible to change the plight of the many despondent Egyptians. What is going to be the plan? How are we going to revive the economy so that you can create the hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs are necessary? So what, is there any committee right now, anyone is talking about it? What needs to be done? How should we go about it? Where we're going to get the money from? How are we going to spend it? What's happening in that regard?
Yeah, as I said in my statement, we have been approached by a lot of organizations and the European Union, the World Bank, the IMF, and the United Nations, and everybody is willing to help. But the problem here is the financing, and the financing is not flowing as much as we have expected. The main problem in Egypt is that we have almost half the population are young generation below the age of 21 years old. We have about 86 million people. Among those 86, 45 million only are allowed to vote above 21 years old. So we have 43 million Egyptians that require health care, education, training, technology, and jobs.
Exactly.
And this is the dilemma, and this is the challenge that we are going. Of course, the Council of Ministers, in cooperation with the Supreme Council, are working on plans, but these plans are also still being crafted, taking into account that the transitional period of this government, and that this government is not going to be there forever. This government is only a caretaker government in a transitional period, and this is the plan so that they will start a process, and then this process will have to be taken care of by the new government and the parliament and the new president when he or she gets elected.
See, we would love to talk more about Egypt, but let me just switch a little bit to further north, go to Syria a little bit. If you were sitting with Bashar al-Assad, and now
you don't look like him anyway.
And now we know what's happening in Syria. I mean, basically, the military, the internal security forces are cracking down on the people. Nearly 100 people have already died. What would you say to Bashar al-Assad, having experienced what has taken place in Egypt? We are witnessing what's going on in Libya, in Yemen, in Bahrain, and elsewhere. What would you say what kind of advice would you give Bashar al-Assad in order to basically copy what happened in Egypt, which is pretty much was more or less a peaceful transformation of power? What would you say to him?
I would tell him to expedite the reform package that he proposed and to add to it some other elements that was not mentioned on the issue of human rights and democracy and others, and not to wait for long, and not to drag his feet as others did, and to choose the easy way rather than choose the hard way. Don't fight your people, but rather concede to what your people want.
But suppose he doesn't want to heed to your advice.
I'm not going to the United Nations.
But the truth is, suppose he will not heed to your advice. How do you see the situation evolving in Syria if he were not to listen?
I would see the situation would be evolving in a different direction, like what's happening in Yemen or in Libya.
You really feel that way?
Yeah, if he doesn't heed my advice. I mean, that's why my advice is being recorded.
Now, let's move on to another country. Since Bashar Assad won't listen to you. The United States has been accused by being a hypocrisy, being that, for example, the United States has not lend more support, say, to King Khalifa of Bahrain, because obviously we have a different interest in Bahrain. We sort of look the other way because when Saudi Arabia and some other Gulf states decided to interfere in the internal affairs of Bahrain in order to quell the violence. Now, obviously, there are two different standards going on from the United States perspective. What's your views on that? How do you see that American role in this process of this uprising that is taking place throughout the region?
No, the situation in Bahrain is different because the United States, while looking into Bahrain, it looks also on further east into Iran.
Right.
And what is the Iranian influence into what is happening in Bahrain, and whether this is really some kind of a conflict between the Shias, the Iranian Shias and the Arab Shias, and whether the United States is going to side with this side or that side. And that is a changing factor and a complicating factor in the equation of forming a decision here in the United States about where to go with Bahrain. That's why the Gulf countries came out with this Gulf Shield forces that are composed of Saudi and Emirates forces, and which went to Bahrain to help the authorities in Bahrain to stabilize the situation. But of course, there is heightened tension now between Iran and Saudi Arabia and Emirates for doing that, because the Iranians are thinking that they're trying to suppress the Iranian Shias that are residing in Bahrain. So this is totally different than what is happening in other parts of North Africa and in Yemen and in other places where there is no Shia, Sunni, or Christian or Jewish considerations that are taken into consideration.
From an Egyptian perspective, you do agree then with the approach that President Obama has taken vis-a-vis Bahrain. Do you agree or don't you agree? From an Egyptian perspective.
Of taking it cautiously?
Taken cautiously with the view that there is Iran, and we have to deal with Iran somewhat differently. Now, there is obviously concern in Egypt about what Iran is about. Iran ambitions to become a regional hegemon, Iran ambitions to acquire a nuclear weapon. This is not something that the Egyptians to see happen. What is what's your take on that?
I would think that the President of the United States is taking the right decision on this.
So it is okay to apply double standard in this particular case?
It's not okay to apply double standard but the issue here is that the Gulf states were the first one to call for a no-fly zone on Libya, trying to change the regime in Libya while they are protecting the situation in Bahrain. But the description of the situation of Bahrain is not an uprising against the king. It is clashes between two parts of the Shia population in the country. And that is how it is being portrayed to the outside. And based on this kind of situation, I would think that the United States took the right decision.
Yeah, but then how do you see this conflict in Bahrain end? What is going to happen there? I mean, this kingdom has been in existence for more than 200 years. And the likelihood is that King Khalifa will continue. And do you think there's going to be some kind of accommodation between the Shia and the Sunni in Bahrain, being that Iran is going to continue in one form or another to instigate what's taking place there?
No, I think situation could could stabilize in Bahrain. It's not as dramatic as it is portrayed in the media. I think in Bahrain it could be stabilizing in one way or another. Of course, there is always the Iranian influence in all the Gulf countries, but this is also countered by other influence of other leading countries like Saudi Arabia, like Egypt, like others. So that this is going to balance itself.
Now, I just want to get your take on Iran. It is quite obvious to many observers that Iran is seeking a nuclear weapon. It's only a question of time. I mean, the Israeli intelligence as well as American intelligence, pretty much they're very convinced that this is what Iran is after. We know that Egypt is against Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. What it is that you are trying to do or say in connection, suppose Israel decide to take action against Iran, how would you feel about that?
No, I mean, we are against Iran possessing nuclear weapon, and we are also against Israel possessing nuclear weapon on our borders. So that these are the two. We are against possession of nuclear weapon in the whole Middle East, and that's why we have been calling for the establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. And there has been a meeting of the Non-Proliferation Treaty in May last year, and this meeting decided to hold an international conference, a regional conference with some international components, to discuss the establishment of this with the present and participation of Israel and Iran under the auspices of the United Nations.
But do you really think this is realistic, considering where Iran stands? Iran being represent a serious existential threat to the state of Israel. At least that's how the Israelis see it. Ahmadinejad was quite clear about his intention. This is exactly what he keeps saying time and again. Don't you think the Israelis have a point when they suggest that we will not relinquish or will not participate in any discussion about a Middle East free of nuclear weapon unless there is a comprehensive peace between Israel and the rest of the Arab world, and we'll have to include also Iran, albeit it's not an Arab state. Don't you think the Israelis have a point in this regard?
Yeah, I think they have a point, but they have to work on also achieving peace with the rest of the Arab world. But Israel is not playing any positive role in attempting to achieve peace with the Arab world. In the past few years, it's been sliding down very. And you have also to listen to what the Iranians are saying. The Iranians are saying, if you allow Israel to possess nuclear weapons, why not anybody else? Why not Iran? Why not anybody
well,
else?
I mean, like we said before, Israel did not threaten Iran to annihilate Iran, whereas the opposite has taken place. I mean, this is just what we hear, what we see.
Yeah, but you were just talking about military action by Israel against Iran, and I think this has come in the media, and this has come into question many times, and the administration have expressed itself on it that they are not in favor of.
But I honestly know, I think from a diplomatic perspective, and you are an incredibly wonderful diplomat, you're obviously going to say that. But the truth is, wouldn't Egypt? Wouldn't Egypt like to see Israel clobber Iran? Tell me.
No comment.
Tell me.
No, I think the issue of nuclear weapons in the Middle East is going to be very important to settle, because nobody is going to live as a second-class citizen in the region that somebody is having nuclear weapon and being a superpower in one way or another. And that has to be part of the equation while we reach peace in the Middle East, that we have to deal with nuclear weapon issues, whether it is in Israel or whether it is in Iran or in any country in the Arab world or in the Middle East in its definition.
My understanding is that when President Mubarak was still a president, and there was ongoing discussion between Israel and President Mubarak, between the two governments, that is, about Iran, what to do with Iran, and Mubarak pretty much conceded and agreed that Israel need to maintain its current posture of ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying the possession of a nuclear weapon, because he felt at the time that it was good that Israel has this posture, and Iran is quite concerned about that. I mean, this was what's been going on quietly between the two countries, Egypt and Israel, Do you know? Did you know that about that?
No. No. I don't think that this was a statement that was made by the former president.
There was no statement made.
No, not a statement, not even a position that was expressed in private. I don't think, no, because there has been, the president made an initiative to establish a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East since 1989. And it has been on the table, and we have been pushing for it in the General Assembly. We have 2 resolutions on this issue, and then we have been pushing for it in the NPT, which took the decision to convene the conference while the president is still there. And while the official positions are that Israel should relinquish nuclear weapons, and Iran should refrain from trying to acquire nuclear weapons.
Yes, but that was the official position. This is exactly
that is the official and the secret and the declared position. There is no other position.
Let me go to something that Egypt has played very important, significant role in the past, and I'd like to know from you now. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict remain. It's going nowhere. The peace process, I should say. Do you feel that the new government in Egypt, to be soon established, will resume its role to mediate between Israel and the Palestinians to try to accelerate the peace process between the two sides? Do you think that Egypt needs to resume that role as it has in the past?
Egypt has never relinquished that role. It has been doing that role, but the problem is that the lack of cooperation, particularly from the part of Israel, yes, on the issue of settlement. I mean, today there was an announcement of a building of 4 new buildings in 4 new settlements in the West Bank, 1,290 something units. And Israel I mean, settlement is one of the 6 core issues that has to be addressed. And I think Israel will have to implement its commitments in this regard, as we implement our commitments in the peace treaty, and as Jordan implement their commitment in their peace treaty. Let me remind you that in 1978, when President Sadat went to Israel, there has been 2 major achievements, and these 2 was the framework document for the establishment of peace in the Middle East, and there was the framework document for the establishment of peace between Israel and Egypt. And in Israel and the Palestinian, there were only 5 settlements, and there was an agreement. There was 17 settlements, and there was an agreement that those 17 settlements were going to be dismantled over 5 years, and that Israel and the Palestinians and the Arab world are going to work on the establishment of a Palestinian state. The Palestinians made the mistake not to come to Mina House conference, and you know that for history, and this document never gets signed, but that was within the overall documentation of Camp David that has been there. So there is at least a moral commitment. Now settlements are 100 something, 150, 160 something, and it is mushrooming, and there is no commitment to ensure contiguity of the Palestinian territory when this Palestinian state is going to be established.
No, I've always maintained that the settlements have been and continue to be the biggest impediment to making any progress in the Israeli-Palestinian, in the peace process, and there's no question in my mind about that. But when you talk to Israelis, and as I often do, for example, they said, I just came from the region a couple of weeks ago, and I went to the West Bank, and I was had several meetings with top Palestinian officials, and I admired the effort they have made in connection, for example, in trying to maintain the non-violent atmosphere throughout the West Bank, and that was admirable thing to do. And it's even the Israeli intelligence, Israeli security forces admitted that the Palestinians have done a remarkable job in terms of maintaining the security in the West Bank. Having said that, I went to refugee camps, I went to schools, and I watched the Palestinian TV. The incitement against Israel doesn't stop for one moment. Now, I'm not saying that Israel is always right and the Palestinians are always wrong. That's what I'm saying, and I agree with you as far as the settlement is concerned. But the Israelis' position is this. that whereas we appreciate what the Palestinian Authority has done in connection with the stopping the violence against Israelis and against the settlers, the incitement, continuing incitement against Israel in every walk of life throughout the West Bank, it is the kind of thing that is going to perpetuate the enmity, the hatred. And now you have a third or fourth generation of Palestinians who grow up, they don't even know there is an Israel. You don't see a single map in the West Bank that shows Israel. It shows the whole Palestine. How are you going to overcome this psychological major impediment, psychological impediment, when the Palestinians are not told there is an Israel, and then that makes it almost impossible for Mahmoud Abbas or Salam Fayyad to make any serious concession to the Israelis, because the Palestinians are saying, why do you make a concession to non-entity? Israel doesn't even exist from their perspective. This is what the Israelis are saying today. So whereas, yes, the settlement is a major problem, but incitement against the Israelis is just as significant, and it is causing tremendous amount of disconnect between the two sides. What can we do about this?
No, I mean, I hope that your feeling is that it's not that the Palestinians will have to accept settlement and will have to accept the checkpoints and will have to accept the separating wall and will have to accept the discrimination and at the same time be happy. And,
absolutely not.
And say, well, give me more.
I mean, that is
not. I think that this is only a clear reflection of what the Israelis are doing, and that is something that is anticipated. But if you have incitement to what? If there is no single terrorism incident or no single violent incident that took place over the past 2 to 3 years, what incitement? What is incitement?
But
for?
There were.
But if there are,
there were
incitement to do what? Incitement to sit at home and watch TV?
No, you know, 3 weeks ago, a whole family was slaughtered in one of the settlements.
Yeah, that's individual
including a baby
that happens here. A congresswoman was shot in Louisiana and along with 10 other people. So this is not. I mean, there is occupation. End the occupation, then everything will end. But with the mushrooming
policy... Do you really
policy,
feel that? Do you really feel? And you know, I'm against the occupation. I'm against the settlement. I'm against the barriers. I'm against by all means. But how are you going to achieve real agreement between Israel and the Palestinians when the Palestinians themselves still live under a house divided? How are you going to get the Hamas into the political process, without which, let's suppose that Israel reach an agreement with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. What makes you think that Hamas is going to accept whatever the Palestinians are going to agree to?
No, I mean, I think the Palestinians themselves realize that, and that's why President Abbas announced that he's going to Gaza to discuss this reconciliation process, and we encouraged him even though we have a document that has been signed by the Palestinian Authority and was not signed by Hamas, was brokered by us. But he wanted to go to Hamas to open this new page, and we encouraged him very much. And he's coming to Cairo on Wednesday and to discuss this issue and to see how. So we are playing the role to unify and to the Palestinian
front. But what are you saying to Hamas in this particular regard? That is, come September, the Palestinian Authority would like to go to the General Assembly, the United Nations General Assembly, and ask to the General Assembly to declare independent Palestinian state. What are you saying to Hamas to move this forward? What's going to happen, even if that is going to take place? Israel is the occupying power, nevertheless. They're going to stay put. They're not going to change anything, regardless what the international community is going to say. As long as you have another entity called Gaza, ruled by Hamas, continue to threaten it. I'm trying to give you what the Israeli argument is all about.
Yeah, but there are not two independent or two individual Palestinian states, one in the West Bank and one in Gaza. That is the impression that some are trying to give. But it is only one state, West Bank and Gaza, one state. The people of Hamas and the people of Fatah and Tanzim and the others and Fida, many others factions, 14, 15 factions, are all constituting one population with one country.
By what definition? By whom? They are constituting
The fact that Israel withdrew unilaterally from Gaza doesn't mean that Gaza became an independent state.
It's not an independent state, but
Israel kept bombarding Gaza in 2008 for about a month.
But Hamas and Palestinian authorities simply don't see eye to eye on anything.
They will have to deal with themselves, and we are trying to encourage them, and we try to host them both in Egypt and to mediate this. When it didn't work, they are opening up the lines directly with them, between each other. So let us try to encourage them to do that in order to unify the front that Israel is going to be dealing with in the final status negotiations.
No, but as I said earlier, I think Egypt played a very important role going back a number of years, trying to do exactly reconciling between Hamas and Fatah, and these efforts were not successful for a number of reasons, in particular because Hamas, to this very moment, still refused to recognize and accept Israel as a reality. I mean, this is, again, I'm in favor of a two-state solution 100%. I'm in favor of...
No, but tell me, how do you want to deal then with Hamas? Do you want to deal with it militarily?
No, I'm asking you. You are the ambassador.
Well, I mean, I'm the ambassador, but I'm telling you that the only thing is that we have to ensure that this reconciliation, this reconciliation should go together, and we should be supportive for this. And we are extremely supportive to this kind of reunifying and reconciliation between all parts of the Palestinian people. But the fact that also Gaza is being surrounded and is being boycotted, and that the crossing points are not open, and Israel is creating also a big humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and that is also offending the people, regardless of their belonging.
But the truth is, while Israel maintained a blockade around Gaza during the last few years under Mubarak regime, he maintained just the same tight control and did not allow anything to go in and out of Gaza. In fact, some said even the Egyptian behavior were even worse than the Israeli behavior in that regard. So you can't say just the Israelis put the blockade and closed.
No.
Participated
I think
fully.
The Egyptians, the Egyptians fully opened the borders more than the Israelis opened the borders. We have only one crossing border with Israel, which is Rafah border. Israel has 6 borders. If you count the numbers the borders have been opened, you will find that the Egyptians opened 3 times or 4 times more than when the Israelis opened the border. So don't tell me that President Mubarak was suffocating the people in Gaza and trying not to open the borders. That's not true.
Well, I mean, we know only too well that the Egypt played just the same kind of role and did not prevent members of Hamas and any kind of free travel from Gaza to Egypt. I mean, this has been known for years. Travel
and crossing of money and other, because the crossing from Rafah is governed by the 2005 crossing agreement. And this crossing agreement has to be applied mutatis mutandis. We cannot apply this, we cannot allow this agreement to be misused and then to be accused by the international community by violating an agreement that has been recognized by the Egyptian government. And that is where those money that were coming to Gaza, we prevented those money. Said, well, this money go through Israel because it is going through the other. But this is a crossing point for individuals, and then for emergency cases that want to go out, we allow them to go out.
I would love to continue this.
I would love to continue too.
I just want to tell you that I have been and will continue to be a great admirer of Egypt for many reasons, many reasons. And I honestly feel that what happened in Egypt in the last couple of months is nothing short of admirable, and I hope and pray that the Egyptian people will continue the march for freedom and will set an example for the rest of the Arab world. Egypt, after all, has been the leader and should continue to be the leader in this regard, and I want to wish you, your country, the best of everything. My role is to be the double advocate. What would you like to conclude? Would you like to impart with something on your part with this wonderful audience?
Well, I would like to conclude by saying that Egypt is witnessing yet again, one of its most historical moments. And we need all the support we can get. Not financially, we need you to come to visit Egypt to start with. And, but second, we need all the support, as we were discussing before, with the young generations, with the training, with the programs, with all other activities that can build a democratic society on a viable and sustained economic perspectives.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you heard anyone so wonderful, so straightforward, so open?
No.
Give him a big hand.